What's up, you guys? So in this video, I'm going to be going over Micron, a stock that I picked out about 6 months ago, and I'm going to kind of give you a gist of what the stock has done since then and what direction I think the company is going in over the next couple of years. So there have been a couple of major news headwinds that have involved Micron and the whole DRAM and NAND supply chain globally, and so I'm going to be addressing those and really where I think Micron is positioned to really take advantage of what's going on exactly. So just a quick recap. When I said that I was buying Micron back in, I believe, February, between January and February, so far the stock's up 20% since then. It reached a high of up about 50%, and since then it has kind of come back down on China-related news that I'll get into later. And I personally still think that the stock has about 63% more room to grow. That's giving my personal price target of it around $100 billion market cap. And that's just kind of based off of where I think their competitors are and really where I see the demand for DRAM and NAND going in the industry over the next couple of years. So another thing that to really keep in mind with Micron is that Micron is kind of a cash flow and income beast right now. It has produced over between $8 and $10 billion in just net income over the past, in the past year. So since this time last year, and the margins that it has producing is only going up and up and up. And so far, I think right now their margins are about 38 to 44% per quarter, which is kind of ridiculous. And that's just kind of shows like how much demand there is for their semiconductors and how little there are around between Micron, their major competitors, which are Samsung and HP Hynix, and Micron's just being able to position really well because they can jack up the price on their semiconductors with realistically no competition. So, according to Samsung, what was just released in their last earnings report, is that a lot of their personal semiconductor supply chain is, it's kind of getting bogged down and demand is lowering, except for their DRAM sector. And so they estimate it's still continuing to grow between 13 and 20%. Give or take on what the demand is for smartphones and other devices over the next few years. And this is great because Micron is actually the only company in this space to be gaining market share in the past 2 years compared to Samsung and SK Hynix. So Micron with growing market share in that specific space and the fact that the demand is still growing over the next few years, it kind of puts Micron in a really good position to even increase the amount of cash flow they get per unit up over the next few years. So now going into really what happened to the stock. So the stock hit around $62, $63 per share, and then a news article came out not too long ago about a company in China, breaking Micron's patents and then filing a lawsuit against Micron for actually using their patents in China, and then they wanted to ban Micron from selling certain brands of DRAM and NAND products in China because they were saying that the patents were theirs and they were infringing upon it. Now, so currently the Chinese government hasn't fully disclosed which way they're going to rule with it. Micron has a very long history selling in China, so Micron's personally bullish on the sense that they'll be able to, have the courts ruling in their favor. However, if you look at the way that the Chinese economy normally works, the Chinese economy likes to buy certain positions in Chinese companies, and they become much more favorable to how they're going to get filed against say a foreign company based off of the fact that they have, multiple incentives to want the Chinese company to be the one who wins the lawsuit. So that is a pretty big risk going on right now. China represents about 49 to 51% of Micron's yearly revenue. However, it was stated in a emergency report that for this quarter, the impact on said lawsuit when everything got put on ice for right now and Micron cannot continue to sell these things until the Chinese government decides a final ruling, they say that those specific products only impacted about 1% of their annual revenue, and because their last quarter was already underway, when this went arise, it should be less than 1% impact to their total revenue, and they believe that they're still within the upper limit of their guidance that they raised last quarter. Now, so I look at that as, there's two things that can happen. Either one, you have the Chinese government, ruling in Micron's favor and saying that they both have, the ability to sell these specific semiconductors, and that Micron wasn't, in fact, stealing any patents from anybody, especially because they've been using the semiconductors before this other Chinese company has been in business, but that's beside the point. And in which case, Micron will just continue to benefit from the immense demand for DRAM, especially over the next few years, because as more devices come out, the amount of demand for RAM is just going to keep going up and up, especially with the Google competing with the Spectre meltdown that happened with Intel that I explained in this video over here. Google's solution to that is to create an even more RAM demanding version of Google Chrome, which will only make certain devices require even more RAM in the future. So that's kind of the bullish light and the best case scenario for Micron. With that, they should be able to rocket through the next couple of years because demand should only be going up in the near run. And with being able to still count on all of the market share that they acquired from China over the past few years, they'll just have so much free cash flow, it will be ridiculous, and the company will become even more profitable than they are now. Now, on the negative side of things, if you want to be a bear looking at the situation, there is a pretty good possibility that the Chinese government will rule against Micron and ban the sales of their specific products that are, being looked into as patent infringement. Now, what has been said so far about Micron is that even though, they get about half of their revenue in China, these specific products are only, impacting, as of right now, about 1% of their annual revenue. Now, because they have not directly listed what products are the ones that are being, that are in the mix of this lawsuit, it's really hard to say of how much, assuming that, say, they are banned from selling those products, it's really hard to say right now how much impact this is going to be in the long run. If it was, say, every single Micron product, then they would be able to, then they would realistically take, close to a 50% net revenue cut, and that would take their extremely low PE right now at about 5, and that would bump it up to 10, which, keep in mind, is still lower than the industry average, but that is what pretty much people are pricing in right now with the stock's performance. So for me personally, I'm kind of, playing it by ear and really going to be looking into what they come out with their, what they state when they come out with their new earnings report in September. What their guidance is and really like how the things in China are going and really how much of an impact this is going to have in the long term. If this is worst case scenario, I would probably end up selling all of my shares, mainly because there are just other players in the semiconductor space. Micron has an amazing balance sheet. They've been paying down debt, and they have great fundamentals right now currently. However, they do have a very cyclical and demand-based product, and if they lose roughly half of their market share, it's only a matter of time before they start really having to revamp everything and start to kind of look at their business model and see, okay, now where do we go to now double our revenue to make up for the fact that we just lost China? So right now, I would say that that Micron as a whole, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a buy, but if you're bullish on Micron being able to get through this and get past this, this is an amazing opportunity to buy up shares. Now, I already have my position in Micron, so I don't really need to load up anymore. Again, if you were thinking about starting a position in Micron, it's kind of slowly start into it and really look forward to the next earnings report. I imagine that depending on the ruling, there's going to be a huge pop or drop in Micron's price at that point. I could see this going up or down 10% based off of how the update goes with China. All in all, I am still bullish on Micron because the demand for RAM is only going to continue to grow as more and more citizens use technology and as more technology gets integrated into pretty much every industry ever. RAM and NAND, coincidentally, are the two most important semiconductors for the average end user's experience. If you upgrade your RAM in a computer, you will directly see performance improvements as opposed to almost any other component. So it's pretty important for the end user to have as much RAM as possible. And with the new phones coming out right now that are averaging 6 gigs of RAM, and the new graphics cards that are going to be coming out that are going to be averaging between 8 and 16, without even any of the new autonomous industries or any of the other things that Micron has just started to get their feet wet into, Micron has a lot of opportunity to grow. But again, as I said, China is a big risk for a lot of people. And one last thing is that something that was very interesting with Micron's last earnings report is they actually started to dabble with the idea of paying a dividend. Now, Micron is kind of understanding that they're in a very cyclical space, and they know that the amount of cash flow that they're receiving right now and how high their margins are right now probably won't last, in the next 10 years, but they're being very smart about what they're doing with all this extra money. So they've been paying down about roughly half of their long-term debt, which is amazing as a Micron shareholder, because now, assuming they cut their revenue by half, they still have enough free cash flow to just pay off of their debt, assuming worst case scenario. So that's something I really like to see. I'm someone who really likes low amounts of debt on the balance sheet. Because referring to how Peter Lynch invested, if you have a company that has no amount of debt, no matter what happens, they can't go bankrupt. They can be bought out, but they can't go bankrupt. So that makes me feel really happy. They dabbled with the idea of paying the dividend. In one sense, this will make them less volatile to cyclicality because, more and more people count on just the free cash flow for their portfolio. I'm personally against them getting a dividend. That's mainly because, I'm a tech-based investor. I like growth, and I like dumping as much money as possible into research and development. So depending on how fruitful that dividend is going to be, I personally don't think it would be the best move. That is, unless they do not see the ability to innovate any of their products over the next few years, which I personally don't believe in. So that's about my update with Micron. It's a pretty interesting spot for Micron to be in right now. I'm personally, again, I'm still bullish on the company, and I see them doing great things. However, worst case scenario, depending on how things with China go, there could be a lot of obstacles that Micron will have to overcome. Although, if it's not worst case scenario and it's anything of like mediocre to optimistic, I see Micron exploding in value over the next few years because they really have nothing holding them back. They have an improper, unfair valuation, in my opinion, and they have a growing industry that is only going up in demand. Anything short of having a global recession, the demand for RAM is going to be increasing over the next few years. Like, that's everybody in data, anybody in tech, anybody in, just anything to do with technology knows that servers, products, anything that you can possibly think of that has a semiconductor in it will need more RAM, just based off of the way that, applications are growing, everything's getting more interactive. The industry will only go up over the next, 10, 20, 30 years. But just in the short run, depending on how things go with China, is going to really impact the stock's performance. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you a Micron shareholder? Do you think, are you optimistic? Are you bearish on what's going to be happening with China? Is the news with China, did you sell? Anything like that. If you want any other specific insights with Micron, just let me know, ask me in the comments. And if there are any other stocks that you want me to go into, really give my kind of perspective on it, just let me know down there. I'll probably be doing a video on Facebook pretty soon, just because of the major drop, and I did end up buying some shares. And I'll kind of explain what my expectations are for Facebook and all of that in the future, and really where I see the company going. All right, so with all that, thanks guys, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.